Hi everyone and welcome back to the channel. So I kind of want to make a follow-up on my previous video. In that I talked about, I was kind of unsure what I wanted to play for Season 4 and I kind of, landed a little bit on the Paladin. And what I kind of failed to mention was really specifically what actually drew me to the Paladin, because one of the biggest thing that I mentioned, and it is also the biggest thing, was that I simply just kind of wanted something fresh for Season 4 to kind of keep on the fire that that wants to play WoW. It's not that at all that I want to quit anything. Actually, I'm really drawn to it right now. I'm really excited for Season 4, but I definitely sense that, Dragonflight is coming to an end for me personally. I'm kind of mentally looking forward and just going into the War Within. And my tank option was basically between the Warrior and the Demon Hunter. Demon Hunter I mained in Season 3 and Warrior I mained back in Season 1. So both of them I had plenty of experience on. So I wanted something fresh. So what makes Paladin such a great choice, at least what makes me really consider maining it, is basically just that you have, the thing that I was missing out on the Warrior was basically just the utility, and that was the thing that I was kind of why I was thinking of just sticking on Demon Hunter, because it's going to be the most OP tank next season as well, because of just the utility. I didn't want to be completely left without anything going from Demon Hunter to any other tank, so the Paladin was, clearly a really good choice here. You have a bunch of, silences, interrupts, which, not as great as the sigils, can definitely shut down specific ads, or, even give your group a little time, or a little breathing room between spells. The other thing about the Paladin that really, the more that I've played it here over the last couple of weeks, has basically just acknowledging and appreciating the fact that everything is just ranged on me. I don't have to be stuck in combat or in melee to actually survive or just do damage or anything. Almost all of my abilities can just be targeted to someone else and just stay completely ranged. I can't tell you how many times I've played on a different tank where, my taunt is on cooldown and I see an ad, I lose aggro on it or whatever, and I have to, run out of melee to pick it up, or, also just, Swirlies comes on the ground, Entanglement as an affix also just forces you sometimes to move, and, on a Death Knight or, even a Warrior, just a lot of the other tanks actually, you just kind of left without doing anything. DK is definitely the worst offender here, because you can't self-heal, you can't, gain resources or anything when you're outside of melee. You're just basically completely useless. And, that's definitely leading to frustrating gameplay moments and stuff like that. So playing in the Paladin and just being able to just completely target everything, being able to not only interrupt ranged kicks while still maintaining all the other packs, so you don't have to run in between and create confusion or whatever for the puck, but you also just be able to execute targets that standing behind. And, if you're tanking yourself, or just if you're in a group, maybe you notice multiple times that you have sometimes a caster with 2 or 3%, but no one is just focusing them, it's just standing there just getting free shots off and just doing a lot of damage. Paladin is a great choice to, again, just being able to completely execute and kill the target, without having to move a single inch. Something about the Paladin that I've always been kind of drawn into, also when I mained it back in Shadowlands for a season, is this is the closest we get, maybe we'll get in the future even closer, but for now this is the closest we will have to having a support role in a tank. Not meaning that you're a support tank, you are the main tank here, but just more in the sense of you are you have really good opportunity to give out just healing, dispels, lower the damage of with sacrifice, you can reduce the intake of your party members' damage. There's a lot of options here to lay of hand as well, all your protections and your shields and stuff like that. And you are a tank that has a lot of interesting utility, because compared to the Demon Hunter, whose utility is a lot more universal or just all around always good. Your utility is more situational, where you're not always gonna have to use sacrifice, you're not always gonna have to use Slay of Hands, but when the situation needs it, it's like honestly incredible utility. And that alone just makes pucking extremely, not extremely, but just in general more safe, because the more you actually have control over, right? And that's also, you probably know me, like, one thing I always mention is I want to have influence on my runs. I think there's nothing more frustrating when, I'm just failing a key and it's basically nothing that I can do about it. And this gives me the option to just, have a lot of influence. And, I might not be able to save every single one, or, being able to use my utility, like, perfect every single time. But just having the option is something that I'm, like, very welcoming towards. But it's not just all sunshine about the Paladin. I do have a few worries, or just general something that's was holding me back or making me doubt a little bit. So the first thing is actually the tier set that we will get in season 4. So I'm very happy about the appearance that we're gonna get the next season here. It's from Aberus. It always kind of reminds me of Space Marines, kind of from Warhammer, which I think is super cool, and I think it's really fitting for the Paladin to have this religious, huge warrior set thing. I guess it's just the shoulders, the huge shoulders that kind of makes me think of the Space Marine, but yeah, I enjoy that. But the actual ability tier set here, no, I'm not really sure I'm a fan here. So honestly, I'm really shocked that this won the contest, or the voting for what tier set we should be able to get in this season. I'm just gonna assume here, because I haven't played Paladin, and I haven't done the math personally, so I'm just gonna assume that that is the one that's the most beneficial, since that's the one that won. I really can't see why people would, troll and just pick out the most boring and the worst tier set that the Paladin has to offer. And with that said, I do remember hearing, and also testing out myself on the PTR, that all of the Paladin's tier set, this whole expansion, and honestly has kind of just been meh. Especially the season 2 one is probably the one that I remember the most, because it had probably the most potential. But if I remember correctly, the healing that just came out of that was just not up to par. Especially not up comparing it to something that the amount of power that Guardian Druids get, right? So giving out versatility to the whole party, and basically having it up, I'm not really sure if it is 100% uptime, but it's gonna be really close. Is really great. I'm really sure that it's really good. You should not scoff out on on versatility as a stat. It gives out a lot of of value for you and your party, because that's the thing. It's not just you. It's your entire party. So already talking about before of the utility, talking about how the Paladin is kind of this support role, where you just in general just make the whole experience much safer for your party. This tier set kind of follows that along, and it works into that. It's just super boring. It's just honestly so boring. You are not going to, even though versatility is a really valuable stat, it's not really something that you're necessarily going to feel that much. It really reminds me of Thundering, the last seasonal affix, rest in peace. Where, was it 30% damage increase we got? It was something like that. It was something where you actually got a huge amount of damage increase, because you didn't really control it, kind of that. You just never really felt it. And I kind of just have that worry that that's what's gonna happen to this tier set as well, where I'm just gonna go in and it's just not gonna do anything, right? And it kind of honestly is the same as the one that we are going with right now in season 3, the one that buffs your consecration. From what the few weeks that I've been playing now, it's the same rotation as before, and what I will do next season is just sometimes my consecrations are buffed up. This might be a little bit where you hold something off, but it's kind of minimal, the amount of changes. the Paladin's tier set has had on it. That was basically the big thing that was holding me back. The other thing that was also kind of making a little bit doubt is that, I've been pushing hierarchies as a pretty low gear tank. And I run into one of those issues that the Paladin has. It's basically just that the Paladin and the DK, I think it's just those two at this point in history. It's just that they are the tanks that can get one-shotted. And being away from both the DK and the Paladin for such a while, that is definitely a jarring playstyle. It's just it's a big change from going from the warrior and the demon hunter, right? Who basically, if you're playing it right, you just basically can't die. So when I was pushing 16s and stuff like that on my Paladin here over the weekend, I experienced getting one shot at 2 keys. But one thing that I noticed, and was I was a little bit worried about this. One thing I noticed was that it's just always my mistake when it happens. And I do remember that the Paladin was basically the tank that I learned how to tank properly on. Because it really is a tank that really forces you to play it correctly. It's not, I would not say it's as punishing as Demon Hunter is. If you fuck up on Demon Hunter, you can really screw up. Because you do have some lifelines here on the Paladin can quickly save you up. But you are definitely squishy on the Paladin if you are not playing it really optimized. And I'm sorry, I shouldn't say optimized, because this is not to say that you have to sweat on the Paladin to make it work. It's a really excellent tank. No, it's just more that you really need to be noticed when your Shield of Righteous is up, when you're using your cooldowns and stuff like that, because you will just get executed if you're screwing up. On the warrior, you can kind of survive doing all these mistakes and stuff and you can't really on the Paladin. It forces you to actually play better. And I remember that back in Shadowlands, and it was actually a really rewarding experience. So while it can be a little bit scary, I'm also kind of reconsidered it and thinking about maybe I should just welcome it and just,